Find the domain of y equals 1 over x minus 2. Well, let's recall that the domain consists of the set of all possible inputs, or another way of saying that is all possible x values for this function. Let's consider what are our possible x values. On the right-hand side of this equation, we have a fraction, and in the denominator of that fraction, we have an x variable. And whenever we have an x variable in the denominator of a fraction, it's always useful to remember that the expression 1 over 0 is undefined. That means that mathematicians haven't been able to come up with a consistent value for 1 over 0, or in fact, anything over 0 is always undefined in our mathematical system. That means that if we have some x value, which means that on this right-hand side, when we input that x value, get 1 over 0, we know that that x value won't be part of the domain because it's not a valid input. Well, let's determine what x value that would be. So what we want on this side is 1 over 0. We know that we'll get 1 over 0 here when we have x minus 2 equals 0. Well, if we add 2 to both sides, we get x equals 2. So this says that at x equals 2, y equals 1 over 0, which is undefined, and consequently x equals 2 isn't part of the domain. Let's just confirm that. At x equals 2, we have y equals 1 over, and then we'll sub in x equals 2 here, so 2 minus 2. Well, if we simplify this down, 2 minus 2 is 0, so this equals 1 over 0, and this is undefined. So again, we've shown that x equals 2 is not a part of the domain. Well, we know that x equals 2 isn't a part of the domain. What x values are part of the domain? Well, it turns out if we substitute any other x value apart from x equals 2 into this equation, we get a valid output. We get y equals 1 over something that isn't 0, and consequently that's defined. So let's confirm that. Let's substitute in, say, x equals 1. Well, at x equals 1, we have y equals 1 over, again we have x equals 1 here, so 1 minus 2. Let's simplify that. 1 minus 2 equals minus 1, so we get y equals 1 over minus 1. 1 over minus 1, well, that's the same as saying minus 1. That simplifies to minus 1. So that's minus 1. So at x equals 1, we get y equals minus 1. Well, this is defined, so this is a valid output. Y equals minus 1 is a valid output, and consequently x equals minus 1 is a valid input for this function. Consequently, x equals 1 is a part of the domain. So, as I said, we could substitute any other value in here. It doesn't have to be x equals 1, it could be x equals 5 or x equals minus 10, just so long as it isn't x equals 2, because at x equals 2, it's not part of the domain. So how do we write this? Well, we simply say that our domain here, the domain of this function, we write it as x is not equal to 2. And we're done.